Here, got a good book, one of my collection I brought over with me when I moved to Bosnia. It's called Orange, Green and Khaki. It's the story of the Irish regiments in the Great War 1914 to 1918, and it's some weighty book, and it covers everything in there. Ypres, Salonika, Macedonia, lots of places you wouldn't think that Irish people would travel to as part of the British Empire troops. I'll read you what it says on the back, the inscription, because it encapsulates it completely. Nearly 1/3 Irishmen fought in the Great War, and 50,000 died. There was a significant Irish presence in every major theatre of war. The Irish were mobilised in 3 divisions, the 10th, the 16th and the 36th, as well as in the traditional Irish regiments. In all, 72 battalions were raised and saw active service, while the achievements of the 36th, especially on the Somme, are well known. The stories of the 10th and the 16th have remained largely untold until now. Tom Johnston's book is the first comprehensive overview of Irish participation in the war. As such, it is a major addition not just to Irish history but to the history of the war in general. And the author, Tom Johnston, is a retired British Army officer originally from Ireland. He has lived in England since his teens but still has strong family connections in Ireland. And the book is published by Gill and Macmillan. Orange, Green and Khaki. Story of the great Irish regiments during the Great War. Some fantastic tales in here. I'll take you around some of my other books that I have now, just to give you an idea what I get up to while I'm not typing away on the internet. I collect a majority of Minolta cameras because the lenses on the later models fit the Sony digital cameras. So you buy one that does film and it can also do digital. And a lot of the old film cameras here, Russian make, Chinese even, Japanese, some Germans, some East German and some West Germans. I'm pointing at a West German now, and behind that is 2 of his East German brothers. Then a Russian Zenith with the Olympic mark. They had the games in Moscow. But some of the books here, I've got a lot of Guards paraphernalia and magazines in this area here, going back to the 80s when I finished. And then if we move on, one of the books I cherish is one that my father gave me, called Flywheel. And it's a fantastic book. And I'll try and zoom in and show you why it's a fantastic book. It's by Tom Swallow and Arthur Pill, and the members of the Mühlberg Motor Club, Stalag 14B, Germany, 1944-1945. And what happened was, whilst they did attempt to escape, this was a consideration all the time, but to keep the morale up of people who sometimes would be helping with things like tunnelling projects and escape attempts, but knew they would never ever be on the list to get included for escape. People used to do all sorts of things within, either drama groups, sports groups, and this particular small group would pass around these newsletters every month or so, and they collected them after the war. A lot of people had kept them somehow, and it's absolutely great reading. It's like dreamland. It's like what they would want if they ever got out, the ideal motor, etc. Let's have a look. Okay, again I'll read out what they said on the fly cover because it's interesting. Flywheel is a facsimile reproduction of a unique collection of motoring magazines produced during World War II in a prisoner of war camp in Mühlberg, Germany. Each edition was drawn and scripted by hand and circulated around the camp for the members to read and pass on. The first being produced in May 1944 and the last in March 1945. It depicts a nostalgic look at a former life away from war and prison camps as seen by the magazine staff, describing motoring adventures before the war, road tests of motor cars, motorcycles, and features on the quest for the ideal motor car, a speculative edition featuring the 1944 motor show, motoring advertisements, editorial comment, and even the letters page. The illustrations of tech were produced largely from memory using whatever raw materials the staff could lay their hands on, employing considerable ingenuity in the face of adversity. So, I mean, while we go to war to fight, my dad always used to say this, why we go to war to fight is to preserve ideals. So those ideals are sometimes things like people playing football during the war while other people were serving at the front. People often said, why are we doing all this? Why are we praising stars for being cricketers and also soccer players while we've got people on the front? Well, that's the reason we go to the front, to preserve all those things that we cherish and want to keep going and don't want other people to close down. And this really was part of the situation, keeping the guys in the camp happy and content in a certain way, so that they would all pull together when needed. And I think hope is the basis of life, really. If you don't have any hope, you can quickly sink into an abyss. I don't know what this is. This looks very much like someone's drawn a Ku Klux Klan man or something, yeah? But that comes later than this book. So, very interesting books that my father had. He had hundreds of books. And of course, we took a lot of them down to Colwyn Bay Station Road bookshop and gave them to the guy there. My dad had bought a lot from him, but we ended up giving them back, and we got a token amount, something like 40 quid for maybe about almost £1,000 worth of books that we gave back, just because the guy felt embarrassed. Not because we wanted it off him, but he wouldn't let us go without taking some of these books off us. Well, this is one I rescued from my dad that means something to me, and it meant a lot to him. I'm putting you back there. Next to that is the history of the Irish Guards in the Second World War. Then a book called The Mix. We should all know that one if we are Irish Guards. And then Guderian, Achtung Panzer. And there's a couple of books then on German army uniforms. There's one that you must get and look for. It's very hard to find, but it is the daddy of them all, and I'm going to get it out now. Sorry if you're gone upside down for the moment. Normal business will resume. This book I've had twice in my life. I sold the first one when eBay first started to a guy in Australia, and he said, yes, send it to me. And I said, how do you want to send it? Because airmail is going to cost you another 40 odd quid. He said, oh, send it by boat, don't worry. I want the book, and send it but the cheapest way possible. So it took about 4 to 5 weeks to get to him, and he was really pleased, because it's a difficult book to get in the UK, let alone in the Australasia. But it's by Brian L. Davis, and this has everything in it to satisfy anyone, from the drums and pipes of you know, my own regiment. They would be interested in certain things, that accoutrements and birds' nests that are worn on the shoulders, and anything you can think of, lanyards, duty gorgets, which in German is called Ringkragen, and obviously things like the various honour guard insignia. And this book has been around a fair bit. This is a second edition, and it's by Arms and Armour Press, and it's got everything. They discussing the various chaplains that they had there, and the order that they would have, bishops to normal clergy. There's a lot of special stuff, like these two chaps here. One is a Feld service uniform, and the other is a German army bandsman with swallows' nests on their shoulder. A lot of stuff from German magazines of the war, which was called Signal, and it was like our soldier magazine, full of bullshit, as was ours, to be fair. Different types of steel helmet. So this bloke's wearing a 1918 cavalry helmet, just before the start of the Second World War. Then there's the Model 1935 steel helmet, and then there's a Shiramutsa, which is an NCO's hat, and there's so much regulations about these hats. For instance, the very senior non-commissioned officer, so something like Hauptfeldwebel, could wear an officer's cap, or he could wear the actual braid instead of the leather band round his shiramutsa. And then you go into the panzer berets. They had these big panzer berets to start off with. So these are these Ringkragen, or duty gorgets, that they would wear either as field police, Bahnhof watch people on the trains, stations. Lots of standard bearers would wear them as well. So not just the police, but people within the organisation. This guy was an Obergruppenreiter, awarded 4 Panzer Vernichtungsbezeichen for his single-handed destruction of 4 Soviet tanks, and you can see them on his right upper arm, along with the Iron Cross. I believe that to be the first class, because it's on show. The ribbon for the second class is above. And then Strength Through Joy, the old PT that they used to do. There's some lanyards that you won for things like marksmanship, and these are anti-tank and low-flying aircraft destruction badges. So Brian L. Davis is the book. German Army uniforms and insignia 1933-1945, and it's on press is I read that out, I'll read it out again. Arms and Armour Press. So I'll put you back. Leave you back there for the moment. And then there's various other things. There's a book there called Tank Action from the Great War to the Gulf by George Forty, who was a lieutenant colonel in one of the tank regiments, or in the cavalry anyway. And then there's some sort of books that you need to have a take on the situation. There's two by Loius de Bernieres, who's a British author. He's actually of Norman extract, so he's got a flowery name, but he's English. And one is called Birds Without Wings, and it's about Thessalonica and Izmir on the so both shorelines. One is in Turkey and one is on mainland Greece. And at the turn of the 19th century, this mass swapping and exodus of people that didn't fit in the location they were, they agreed with the Ottomans under the Greek government, which was a fairly young government, because unlike a lot of countries, Greece as a modern enterprise has only been around as long as about Italy, from the 1850s. It's a young new state, might be one of the oldest going in terms of you know, Sparta and those sort of things, but as a combined modern country, it's like Italy, it's very recent, and like Germany, it's very recent, a confederation of smaller states, some who had kings and princes and some who didn't. Yeah, but this book, Birds Without Wings, is about that Thessalonica and Izmir situation where they swapped, or they forcibly dragged people out of their location because they said, you're not from here, or you shouldn't be from here, so we're swapping you now with those that are coming from the other way. And both those locations I spoke about had great population exchanges which caused suffering, death, sickness, disease, disenfranchisement, I think is the word I'm looking for, where you end up with nothing basically. And the other one is Captain Corelli's Mandolin, which is about the island which the Italians were administering when they were in the Axis powers, and they were quite a likeable bunch apparently, but then the Germans got to the point where they couldn't trust them, and then obviously Italy capitulated, and what you had then was this island of Kefalonia had some atrocities from what you call friendly fire type things, you know, where a lot of Italians were taken out because they couldn't be trusted by the Germans. And we all know that there's a film with Nicolas Cage in it. The book is okay. Not my favourite Loius de Bernieres book. My favourite Loius de Bernieres book is this one here, which is his first book. It won a Commonwealth Writers Award, and if you want to read a fantastic book about South America, it's some made-up mythical place in South America, but it basically is Argentina Brazil, parts of Peru and all that, and the atrocities, is this book by Loius de Bernieres. You see, it's well hammered. I read it, and my dad read it. He read it took it off me on the beach in Colwyn Bay and wouldn't let me have it back till he'd read it. He said it was great. So, this is called The War of Don Emanuel's Nether Parts. Don, his father, and it's used not so much as a religious context, it's used where it would be Papa. It's used as a boss of the area, squire. And the nether parts refer to all the areas that the mainland government couldn't really get into, that these people controlled. And it's when I say semi, probably about 1/5 of the book draws on some mythology. The rest of the book is absolutely incredible. I enjoyed it. The type of book I like is something with a bit of action in, a bit of intrigue, etc. And so I suggest the front cover now won't look like that, because this was issued by Minerva and it's now been reissued so many times. This is the first book Loius de Bernieres wrote. This is the book you should be reading before you read the others, and then that will give you a flavour of what the others are like. This is short, sharp and shit hot, whereas these two books here, the one about Kefalonia and the one about Thessalonica and Izmir in Turkey, are a little bit hard going. So there you go. Now I'm going to leave you on this because this video is probably going on a bit longer than it should be, but this is a set of books that I have not read all the way through, but I'm giving it a good try. It's called Winston Churchill. It's 4-volume set, A History of the English Speaking Peoples, and I'm about 1/3 of the way through volume 1. Yeah, and it's absolutely fantastic, as you'd expect. Why do I keep thinking of Stephen Fry when I read him, Winston Churchill, Winnie? Well, because they've all been through the same system. They've all learnt the same bollocks and bullshit, but it's great. It comes off the tongue great, and you can imagine it. I'm sort of mulling it over in my head in his accent. And of course Steve Fry is a great writer and expounder of ideas, and as was Oscar Wilde. I haven't got anything belonging to him. Then I often talk about this last book. I know I said my Winston Churchill will be the last, but this will be the last now. The Bridge over the Drina. The Bridge on the Drina. This is a book about a bridge. The central character is the bridge. In other words, there isn't some Prince Charming that they talk about. They talk about this over 300 years since it was built, and it was built by a guy, Slobodanka. One of my aunties gave this to me. She's Serbian, who Brian would love, from Slobodanka. And I'll read this quickly and then I'll call it a day. The Bridge on the Drina is probably the greatest novel in the Serbo-Croat language and has been awarded the highest literary prize that Yugoslavia can give. It also went on, I might add, to get a Nobel Peace Prize for literature, this author, Ivo Andrić. So many people lay claim to who Ivo Andrić is. The Croats sometimes claim him, the Serbs claim him, and what happened was, as a young child, he was wrestled from his homeland and taken, tied to a horse, back to Istanbul, or Constantinople as it was still called in those days, and taught all the Janissary Corps type building and road building, fortifications, mining and all that sort of thing, and then sent back to the Balkans with a title. He was sort of let's try and see if we can read it so I can cut the bullshitting down. Yeah, So Grand Vizier built, it centres around the great stone bridge built at Visegrad in Bosnia by the Grand Vizier Mehmed Pasha, himself a victim in boyhood of the tribute of blood, and later the highest dignitary of the Ottoman Empire. So this guy was like seized as a chattel, just like you would seize in a Viking raid all the cows, the wives, daughters and everything else, but taken down eastwards to Constantinople, Istanbul, and then trained as a young lad in the court of the Sultan, and then passed the test to be in the Janissary Corps, and then they sent him back and he built this bridge. And I've got some pictures somewhere which I will put on one day. I've already put them on a few times. So the author, Dr. Ivo Andrić, spent his childhood at Visegrad and describes vividly and with great feeling the life of this remote Bosnian town. Born in 1892, Dr. Andrić was one of the most distinguished Yugoslav diplomats. He was Yugoslav minister in Berlin at the time of Hitler's invasion, during the war and the occupation of his country. Dr. Andrić lived in retirement in Belgrade, where he wrote his greatest novels, among them The Bridge on the Drina, a novel on the grand scale, grand in conception and in execution. It will keep the reader enthralled from the first page to the last. Okay, it's been translated obviously by a bloke called Lovett F. Edwards, but it's absolutely cracking. I mean, there's some horrific stuff in there, as you'd expect, like a method of punishment for anyone. We talk about, sending people to Australia for stealing sheep. Well, you read in here the goings on, and some courtship type things between young girls under veil and boys of the opposite religion, all meeting on the bridge. And when I first dated Bizra, I wanted to take her there. I knew of this book. I wanted to see this location, and she stayed with me in my apartment. We weren't married, and not many people really knew that we were dating each other. But she stayed that night so that we could have an early start the next day. She had her hair in rollers and she was looking at the map, charting away there. She had my plastic orienteering compass in her hands, and you wouldn't know that she was not a squaddy herself. She seemed to be able to do a lot of things, and I'm sure she can strip her an AK-47 and put a landmine together. She's that well trained, being former socialist in Yugoslavia. But there you go. So that's only one small part. I've spoken about 4 books, and I've got quite a few down there and quite a few up here. This will interest a few. Tigers in the Mud. That's Michael Whitman. A lot about him, the tank commander that got killed in the end. It's credited to either a Canadian or a British yeomanry regiment who killed him. They both claim it, but he was some cookie. Started off as a junior non-commissioned officer and then was commissioned for his honours. And some stuff here. An Albanian writer there called Ismail Kadare, Broken April. What a fantastic book. Broken April. A bloke accidentally kills someone in his town, and they have this rule, eye for an eye, cheek for a cheek, so they know, all his family know this boy is going to be killed himself. He's got 30 days before that will happen, and it talks about that because it's going to happen in end of April. So Broken April is what's going on, and a lot of Albanians are still like that. They're still like, you screw with me and we'll screw with you. And then there's a book called The Politics of Symbol in Serbia. Most boring title you can ever have, but the book inside is absolutely thrilling, and it tells you why we have such a problem on the outskirts, or the Krajina as it's called, the edge. All these tribes have various people that live in someone else's area but believe it to be their own area, and they are more fundamental than the people living in mainland Serbia. So it's just like saying if you live in Guernsey or Jersey, you're more passionate than the Londoners are about their own country. And there is a great thing to say sometimes, if you can placate or sort out the people that live on the edge, the Kraina, because that's what Kraina means. Ukraine, it means land of the edge. And the Kraina was various areas within Yugoslavia where mainly Serbs were settled, because Serbia was the biggest country out of the six, and a lot of them were into the administration and were sent to other neighbouring countries and settled there over many centuries, not just by the Yugoslav government after 1945, but way during the times when the Turks or the Ottomans were in charge. And then you've got some books that you must have or must read or must know about, the vulgarizers in Europe. You have a book, Mushrooms and Toadstools, of Great Britain and Europe. I mean, eat a mushroom at your peril. The Italians eat poisonous ones, but they know to boil them for X amount of hours. And then, of course, Colombian author called Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude, Leaf Storm, Collected Stories, and Love in the Time of Cholera. They're all fantastic books. They're all translated into English. Some of the translators haven't got a clue, some have, and that's the luck of the draw that you have when you get a foreign writer. It's down to the power of the person translating, really. This one, my favourite book,